All right.
Happy Wednesday, Pacer Nation. Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. Setting the pace, I'm Alex Gould. I'm joined today by Michael J. Facci. And Facci, tell the people what we are doing today.
Oh, it just feels like trade season is nearly upon us. It is the off season. The NBA Finals is done with. So we thought we'd put together a list of, we're not going to put a number on it,
Yeah.
but what should be trade targets for the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah, we're just going to go back and forth until we run out. And if one of us runs out and one has more, we'll just keep going in a row and talk about these players. But I think it's really interesting because the Pacers are in a weird spot right now. They just had a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. They've got 11 to 12, 13 guys maybe that should be in the rotation. So where are these minutes going to come from? What kind of trade could be made? What kind of targets could be made? That's why I think this is all very fascinating. And if the Pacers wanted to get better, are there players out there that could help them? And what would it cost to get them? And what would you have to give up? I think that'll be something we'll get into later this week. But Facci, for today's episode, just going back and forth with our trade targets, I think this is going to be very interesting. So curious, who do you have on your board at the bottom?
I think it's only right we start small and maybe build our way up. This is a guy that can very much be had right now. There's actually rumors that he could be getting waived any day now, but we'll see. That's Kevon Looney. I think
Okay.
Kevon Looney is a respected backup big in this league that is a champion. I think he's been instrumental for Golden State. Good rebounder, good defender, someone that I think that rather than have Golden State eat the money and have to waive him, he could be someone that could be had for pretty cheap. It's not going to move the needle significantly, but we do think that Indiana could improve on the glass and defensively. As a backup big, you know what you're going to get out of Kevon Looney.
Yeah, and I will just say this because I think it's really interesting. It's a new dynamic that's put into play with the new CBA. If you guys listen to my appearance on Locked On Pacers with Tony East, we were talking about this, and Tony brought this up, and I didn't even realize it was a thing. But apparently, with the new CBA, teams are allowed to use their mid-level exception as a trade exception as well. So if you're not sure what a trade exception is, basically the full mid-level exception for a non-tax paying team is estimated to be around $12.8 million. Now, you cannot aggregate that, or another way of saying that is include that with a player to reach a certain salary. So you couldn't say, oh, we got 12.8 with this exception plus Jalen Smith's player option, which is about 4.5, 5 million. That gets me close to 18 million. That doesn't work. It's basically you can absorb a contract up to $12.8 million. So for this example here of a guy like Kevon Looney, who's making $8 million on that final year, Indiana could basically just say, look, you don't got to waive Kevon Looney. We'll take him off your hands. Pacers could absorb him into their mid level exception, and then that would be a legal trade based on the knowledge that I'm understanding. So that does make it a little bit interesting to me because if the Pacers do feel like Jalen Smith could walk in free agency, Kevon Looney would be a nice option to have in terms of someone that is a bit reliable and that's played a lot. But I do wonder, Facci, about his fit with this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very fair. He's not the fastest man. He ain't going to be shooting threes either. But I do think that having a reliable championship big, just a backup behind Turner, I think would be helpful when you look at behind Turner right now. You got Isaiah Jackson, who's still trying to improve on the fly. You don't know what's going to happen with Jalen Smith. And then there's an opening right over there. So I do think that Kevon Looney is someone that, yeah, is he going to take it to the NBA Finals from where we're at now? I wouldn't say that, but I do think that he's someone that if you need for the minutes that he's going to play, he's going to give you everything he's got. And I
Yeah.
think it would actually be a loss for Golden State, just that they're in a tough situation right now where you can't keep everybody. You got to pay guys like Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga, and I do think that their tax bill is just through the roof.
Yeah, Golden State's going to be interesting. There's been talks I could waive Chris Paul, who's got an expire. I think it's like partially guaranteed. I can't remember exactly.
I think it's actually completely unguaranteed, about $30 million or more. So
If they
I
waive him, it
can't.
doesn't count against the cap.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
So I can't see him coming back
Yeah.
to Golden State in any scenario.
Yeah, that's a really interesting team to watch in the offseason. But I'll go to my first person here on the list, Facci, and I don't feel like it would be a traded players list for us. if I didn't put Dorian Finney-Smith on my list. Now, Dorian Finney-Smith, obviously a little bit older now, 31 years old, 2 years left on his deal, around 14.5 to $15 million, something around that range. I like Dorian Finney-Smith. I really do. I think that he makes sense. I think it would have to be the right situation for him to be traded here to Indiana. Would have to play more of the backup four, could potentially play the starting three if the Pacers do want to go a lot bigger. But I just think that around $15 million is a pretty obtainable contract, and he is a name that I'm keeping my eye on.
I enjoyed Dorian Finney-Smith. I do think that he would be a good fit. I still don't believe the rumors that the Nets turned down 2 first-round picks from, because that is more than enough. When you hear that, that's why he didn't make my list, because I'm like, I don't know what Brooklyn's looking for, and we're running low on picks. But if he could be had, he would be a great addition to this team. So
Mhm.
I'm definitely on board with the Dorian Finney-Smith addition. Going back to your point on Chris Paul, I looked at it. The contract does not have a penny guaranteed
Okay.
until June 28th. They have 10 days to guarantee that contract or not.
Yeah, he's
So
gone.
expect a Chris Paul move to be made pretty soon.
Yeah, he's gonna be gone. I think that's a pretty guaranteed thing
That's a guarantee.
with the Warriors and their tax bill. But I'm ready to hear your next player.
My next name, I've liked this guy for a while, and apparently so did Dallas before Portland came swooping in. But that's Matisse Thybulle. Matisse
Okay.
is someone that, he's never been known for his offense. He probably never will be, but he's always been a more than capable defender. Now, doesn't have the same type of, maybe the ideal length that you would like compared to like everyone always say, hey, Aaron Nesmith's a bit undersized. They're actually both 6'5". But I think that Thybulle is someone that he could play the two, he could play the three, and he'd been a better three-point shooter in years past. Last year wasn't great for him, but you look at Portland, and it's just, what are they doing? Which direction are they in? At about $11 million per year, he's actually, I think it's about $12.8 million from Matisse Thybulle. So you can actually absorb him into that mid-level exception.
Yeah.
But he's someone that I think if Indiana can add better defenders, it could go a long way for them.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting name. I actually looked at Matisse Thybulle myself, did not put him on my list just because I wonder if there's going to be better options out there at that position to go after. Because if I were to absorb his contract, would he be getting playing time over anybody else on the roster at that position?
That I don't know. I just think that in terms of coming off the bench, you're getting another really good defender. I think Indiana has a logjam just about everywhere. So for Thibault, it is $11 million. So that's what I thought initially before I said 12.8. So it's $11 million and then 11.5 the following year. So I just think when you look at, like, okay, who could he get playing time over? I guess it's probably the Ben Shepherd minutes, but Shepherd's obviously coming in at much cheaper. He's younger, and I think that you would like to imagine that he can continue to develop as a player.
No, that makes sense. So I'm going to stay with the Portland Trailblazers here, Facci.
Cool.
And I'm going to throw another name out here for you. This might be a little bit of a surprise here. Maybe you thought of this name as well, but I'm going with Robert Williams III. And
I did.
the reason why is, once again, he is in that contract frame that, or not frame, I don't know what the right word is, but the contract, the umbrella, I guess you could say, fitting in that traded player exception, mid-level exception type thing. So I think he's around $12.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. And Robert Williams, to me, has another year guaranteed on his contract, which is very intriguing if I'm the Pacers, because it's around a good number for a center. And if you don't feel confident with Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith could potentially leave. This is some nice backup big insurance. And I think also we saw some really nice moments from Robert Williams with the Celtics. He only played the first 6 games of the year for Portland, and then he got hurt and had surgery to repair. I think it was a shoulder injury. I can't remember exactly what it was. I might be completely wrong on that, but they've got DeAndre Ayton. So why would they want to have Robert Williams play next to him? I don't really think that they are a good fit together. I do kind of wonder what his role is moving forward in the league, because I know that there was a lot of talks about him being a starting center, and with the uncertainty of Miles Turner and what that contract could look like next summer, I think it just does provide some insurance. So to me, Robert Williams III is a very interesting name to keep an eye on for Indiana. If Portland does make a lot of trades, and I'm not going to get into what I would trade for him, but I do think it's a very interesting uh, potential trade out there that could happen.
Man known as Time Lord. Yeah, it was a knee injury, looked it
Knee
up.
injury. Shoulder, I don't know what I'm
That
thinking.
cost him basically the whole season. Just 26 years old. Defensively, he's been a stud. He's
Yeah.
been a great rim protector before, and I think that he was actually a pretty decent piece in that trade that people forget about. That landed Drew Holiday with Boston. So I think a lot of people think of Marcus Smart being moved over the offseason, some other pieces, but Robert Williams was in that deal, and just a wasted season. I think he could have had a pretty good year with Portland. So people forget, but as a backup big, I think that would be awesome. I think he would bring that defensive boost that Indiana needs. And I think with Turner, it feels like we had 2 good years of being able to forget about the trade rumors, maybe even about a year and a half. But he is an expiring contract, like he said. So it is something to think about. Robert Williams, somebody I did debate, didn't end up cracking my list, but would be more than happy if the Pacers are able to work something out for Robert Williams. So curious to see what direction Portland ends up going in. But there could definitely be quite a few players. I did fear you were going to say Malcolm Brogdon. That's someone that I looked at and I was like, I just can't go
Yeah.
back in that direction. So left him off the list.
No, just real quickly, a couple things. Malcolm Brogdon will not make my list. Spoiler alert! Just because he does not fit this style of play that Indiana wants to play. I can't imagine like Malcolm Brogdon might be able to like destroy Indiana when he plays against them, but like that's the only time I felt like he had any great games this season was just against Indiana. Back to
Yes.
Robert Williams. Couple of cons here for him. Number one, obviously the injury coming off a significant injury like that, you just never know what they're going to be like. Number two, Indiana does like having the luxury of a Miles Turner that can shoot threes, where Robert Williams does not shoot the three at all. So you're not going to really get that part of the game that you get from Miles out of a Robert Williams. So that does play a factor into it. But the fact that he has a 7'6" wingspan, Facci,
Huge.
that's pretty impressive considering he's only 6'9". So a lot of good things to like about Robert Williams III. Like him as an insurance type of piece. If he's not fully healthy, you still got Ijax on the roster if Jalen Smith opts out. So just another center out there that can make some sense that maybe you want to take a chance on. Now I don't know what Portland would want for him, but I think that it could be interesting.
It very well could, and I do think that he's going to remind people just how good of a rim protector that he is. That wingspan that you mentioned, that's hard to come across in the NBA. Most guys that have that are more of the Victor Wembanyama type guys that are already well over 7 feet. So
Yeah.
next on my list, you've heard me bring him up before, but he also actually came up in the last episode of Andrew Nemhard. That's Kelly Olynyk. I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not giving up. All right. Kelly Olynyk as a backup big, I think would be good for the Pacers. He was a player that I mixed up before that is at $12.8 million, for next season. He's got 2 years left on his contract. Toronto, a team that's kind of going, it could be headed towards a rebuild. I don't know. They're in that weird spot. Their first pick in this draft is 19th overall. It's from the Pacers as they lost their first round pick. So I think that, look, they might be in a just totally, hey, what can we get for some of these veterans on this team? I think that Kelly Olynyk is someone that if you had Kelly Olynyk backing up Miles Turner at the center spot, I feel like you're getting someone that A, can also hit threes, B, can rebound, C, has been a good passer, and is just a pesky individual in this league. So Kelly Olynyk, I think, is someone that would be a pretty solid addition for the Pacers, but also I don't think would cost a lot.
Yeah, I don't know what the price tag would be for a Kelly Olynyk. I think that's an interesting one. I mean, they just extended him when they traded for him, so I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. I do like Kelly Olynyk. I think I mentioned him on our free agents list that I wanted to put him down, but then realized and I forgot that he had signed that extension with Toronto. I think Toronto their season was very under the radar just because they traded Pascal, they traded OG, and kind of people forgot about what all they brought back in and things like that. So he's an interesting name. I definitely had him on my top 10 list at one point, Facci, and I took him off. So uh, I'm glad that you had him on. I'm going to go to my next one. I'm sure he'll probably be on yours, but if he is, just let me know. This might be a little low for people, but third up on my list here, Facci, I've got Alex Caruso.
He's the next name on my list.
Okay,
Take it
well, tell
away.
me his contract numbers.
So Alex Caruso. All right. So let me pull him up right over here. So
9.8 million.
you got it?
Is it 9.8 million expiring 1 year?
Yes, it is. It is. So confirmed $9.8 million on an expiring deal. But the tricky part is this. We're hearing, and might just be rumors, that apparently the Bulls have turned down about a top 10 pick that was offered to them for Alex Caruso. Like, whoa, if you're Chicago, you might want to take that deal. But that's what made me thinking a little bit of, man, I want Caruso. I just don't know how we'd be able to get him.
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely got an interesting trade that I'm going to bring up on the next episode
All right.
involving Alex Caruso that's going to spark a heated debate between Facci and I can feel it already.
Oh,
But I will
man.
say this, Alex Caruso is the perfect fit for what Indiana needs at the 2 guard. The reason I did put him a little bit lower on my list and not higher is just because, like you said, the asking price, number one, seems kind of egregious. And I think also the main thing for me with him is just like he's on an expiring deal.
Yes.
And trading for guys like that, it's always a little bit risky. And I think that you don't want to make that big risk. So I think Alex Caruso is maybe one of the missing pieces for this Pacers team to take that next step. Really good defender, really shoots the ball well, can play a little point guard, but mostly is, an off ball guy. I don't know exactly. I don't know how much better he is right now than an Andrew Nimhard. That's a heated debate right there. You could have a conversation on, but definitely feel like this is somebody that Pacers probably have targeted before. I think all 29 teams in the league probably are targeting Alex Caruso just because of what he can bring to the table. But this reporting that always happens around the draft, you have to remember a lot of it's a smokescreen. How much did we hear last year that nothing happened, right? I mean, nothing happened that we heard last year. So it's a lot of fun to talk big and get stuff going out there. But I think a lot of times you hear rumors thrown out there just to try to get the conversation started.
It's very possible. It's very possible that maybe Chicago is dangling Alex Caruso out there, and they want to up his value, up those offers that other teams might be sending. But yeah, I think, look, we know
Or
Roosters
let
listens.
me cut you off for a second. There could be a team that wants Alex Caruso that's floating stuff out there to try
Very
to
possible.
get the Bulls to look like they're impossible to deal with to make life more difficult for them. Anyway,
Hey,
continue.
I'm not gonna say that it ain't happening, but back to what I was saying. Look, I know Roosters listen to this. Shout out to Rooster, and he's been wanting Alex Caruso on the Pacers for quite some time. It gets tricky when you're talking about you got Halliburton, you got Nemhard, obviously then you got Ben Mathurin, you got McConnell coming off of a great year. If you're to make a trade for Alex Caruso, either one of those guys got to be in there, or one of those guys is taking a major playing time hit. So it's a tough situation, but he was second team All NBA defensive, great year. He had the most votes on the second team for all defensive. So Caruso, a stud, but many teams want him. Next
Yeah.
player on my list. This would have to be a sign and trade, which always gets a little tricky. And then the money could be an overpay. It really could. That's Contavious Caldwell Pope. I've felt that he would be such a great pacer. But the thing is, they're talking about that he could command $20 million per year. So if you're going to bring on Contavious Caldwell Pope at his age, it's a little bit tricky. But this man is a winner, and he's always been a good 3-and-D player. It just gets a little bit tricky in terms of that sign and trade and potentially overpaying. I mean, what are your thoughts on Caldwell Pope?
I think the fit's good in terms of on paper, play style, that type of thing. The way to acquire him is the issue that I always run into. I think that with what I have as a team right now, I don't know if he's the guy I want to invest in and give up something of value to get him on a sign and trade type of deal. So that would be the only cause for concern. Now, depends on what kind of trade you're looking at here and who can be involved in that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I definitely like KCP. I think he's a really good player. He's been a part of a lot of good teams. Won championships with the Lakers and the Nuggets. And I think that you just can't, you cannot ignore the fact that he's had such a good playoff career, been impactful in a lot of these meaningful games. So, yeah, good player, good role player. Definitely doesn't think he's the star, which is great because you need guys that realize I'm not trying to prove that I'm the number one guy when a team already has that option. So, fit in well. I mean, played great next to Jokic. I'll be interested to see where he goes. I think that if he doesn't wind up back in Denver, the team that makes the most sense to me is Philadelphia because they've got a lot of holes to fill. But kind of curious where he ends up filling in at because I just think that he's a really good player that could be impactful anywhere he goes.
I think he's going to have a ton of suitors. It kind of reminds me of kind of like a more expensive Bruce Brown, where it's
Yeah.
like there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to want him, but how many teams are really going to pony up $20 million per year? I mean, look,
Detroit.
at 31, what, Detroit? Is that what we said?
Yeah, Detroit could do what Indiana did, right?
This man played in Detroit, and I don't know if he wants to go back. So
True.
Caldwell Pope might be saying, you know what? Maybe I'll take a little bit less money elsewhere because I want to win. I think at that point he wants to be in a winning situation. But I just think coupled with the sign and trade of being able to, you'd have to part with probably about two core young players, two good players on the Pacers team, and then the money on top of it just feels like a little bit too much. I would have loved if this was maybe last year where you could have traded for him and he's an expiring contract and maybe it's not, too much of an overpay. But at this point, it's more of just kind of like a pipe dream or just kind of window shopping.
Yeah, and I think that a team that could make sense for him too, that's not Indiana. What about OKC? I know that Josh Giddey was not a great fit as the two because of his lack of shooting, but if they could get him next to SGA, Lou Dort, Chet, that group, Jalen Williams, I think that could be a really good five right there.
Yeah, no, that really is. And I do think that this is finally the year that OKC kind of spends some cash and goes after someone. We've heard them linked to Isaiah Hartenstein. I think that it's like OKC, like they were already a 1 seed. They're coming. They're going to get better. And I think that, hey, they got all those draft picks out there if they do want to work out any type of trade or anything of the sort. So not a bad fit.
Yeah, well, let's stay on the hyphenated names here, Facci, with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I'm going to go to my next player on my list, and that's Nickeil Alexander-Walker from the Minnesota Timberwolves. He's got an expiring contract for about $4 million. I think that this is an interesting player because I loved what he did for Minnesota this year. Was such a really good player off the bench, knows his role, really stepped in, was one of their first guys off the bench to really help with their defense. We know this was a very good defensive team. You talked about it on our free agency podcast, the impact that Kyle Anderson had with his defensive presence. I think that Nickeil Alexander-Walker being a little bit younger makes more sense in terms of the style of play Indiana wants to play. And I'll get into it when I talk about my fake trade that I have for him in our next episode. But I actually think that with him being an expiring contract, with the financial situation that Minnesota is going to face with all of these guys making a lot of money, they could potentially move him. And I think if they could get some more long-term stability for a player, that could make sense. So I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I've liked him since he was drafted. And, I think that he is the cousin of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but they are not the same player, but they definitely do bring some similar things defensively.
Great. I don't know if I'm gonna call it a bounce back year, but I really feel like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, his stats might not show up, but I really do think this might have been his best year of his career. There's been other years where he's averaged more points, but I think over the last few years, it's kind of someone that was a little bit more forgotten about. And I think that he did, up his value significantly. So, I like what he brings to the table. In terms of a trade, yeah, I don't know what that type of value is given that is low contract. Those are kind of the ones that are tough, but Minnesota needs some of those smaller contracts because they're very top heavy. They're very top heavy, and at some point they're going to have to make a decision. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think, is definitely the type of player that Indiana is looking for that can make them better. That good 3-and-D type of player. He's someone who shot about 39% from three and really brought on the defensive end. So I think he's someone who's still getting better at this point in his career, still only 25 years old.
Yeah, he shot 51.7% from two, Facci, this year, as well as 80% from the free throw line, which was, I think, the second highest free throw rate for him in his career in terms of percentage-wise. So, really like him. He'll be 26 here at the beginning of the season, so that's not too old. I think he fits in kind of nicely here with Indiana's age group, and being from Canada, they are Canadian roots here, Facci, with Andrew Nembhard, who's playing for Team Canada, and Benedict Mathurin. And you mentioned Kelly Olynyk from Canada too. So, Canadian
Team
basketball.
Canada, they're looking good.
They're looking good. Let's go to your next player.
All right, my next. This is kind of where things get a little bit interesting because people might be a little bit torn on this. I hear he's available. What are your thoughts on Jarrett Allen?
Jarrett Allen for the Pacers?
For the Pacers.
Man.
Now, hear me out. I mean, look, Jarrett Allen, he's got 2 years left on his contract, about $20 million per year. Very good defender. he's someone that I believe it was. I have the numbers in specific. I believe he was 12th overall in defensive plus minus, or was 12th in defensive win shares, one of the two. So 12th in defensive win shares last year. He's only 26 years old, former All-Star, and when you're talking about a rebounder, the fewest amount of rebounds he's averaged over the last 5 years is 9.6 rebounds. It's what he does. He is a kind of more of an old school big. What would be your thoughts on Jarrett Allen?
Are we giving up Miles Turner to get him?
Unfortunately, that's what it might cost.
Yeah, I mean, they both bring different things to the table. My biggest concern is Pascal Siakam, if he's brought back, which is very expected. That's what is expected. I don't necessarily love the fit of Allen and Siakam together. Offensively, just because of Allen's lack of shooting.
Yeah,
I think that the fact that Siakam said like his dream players to play with would be Kevin
he
Durant,
did.
Miles Turner. I think I would lean Miles over Jarrett Allen. I think they're very close in terms of their tiers,
Mhm.
in terms of where they rank among centers in the league. But I do realize that it is a lot. It's a lot closer in terms of like what player like they're very 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 close, but they're very different in their skill set. So I don't feel like I'm getting much of an upgrade with Jarrett Allen over Miles Turner. I think it's pretty lateral, and it might be worse just because of team chemistry, locker
Yeah,
room stuff. Just you do get better in certain areas, but you also get worse in certain areas. So
yep.
I think I would continue kicking the can down the road with Turner for this season instead of going for a guy like Jarrett Allen. But it's intriguing.
No, and that's fair, and that's exactly why I prefaced it. Where people will be split because Turner hasn't been the same rim protector that he had been in previous years. Jarrett Allen, you know what you're getting over there. The Pacers do need to improve defensively, but obviously they would take a hit offensively because Turner's bringing a whole different aspect of the game, compared to what Jarrett Allen's bringing. So it's something to mull over. It's definitely not something where the Indiana would have to throw too much in there because I do think that both players are kind of on that similar level. Like you said, if there was a ranking, I would imagine they're probably pretty close to
Mhm.
each other, in like a top 10 type of ranking or anything of that sort. But definitely something to think about. But at this point, I definitely wouldn't be banging at the table for it.
Yeah. Okay, let's keep it moving here. My next one here is someone that I think people have mentioned before. I'm very torn on this player in terms of how much I would be willing to invest in him, but I think that he's an interesting player that could help the Pacers out a lot, and that's Brandon Ingram. Brandon
Mm,
Ingram from New Orleans, there's a lot of pros and cons. He has been mentioned in the trade rumors. Started out with the Lakers, got traded to the Pelicans for the Anthony Davis trade, has had some really nice moments in his regular season career, has also dealt with some injuries, has also dealt with some not showing up in playoff moments too, but he is a bigger wing that I think with the right group around him could be in a better spot. Um, like I said, I don't love him. That's why he's on the back half of my list of guys here, but right there in the middle for me, Facci. I think he's a middle of the pack, interesting target to go after.
good player. I just, I don't think I could do it. Here's the thing, I've read that they're saying New Orleans is hesitant to pay him like $50 million a year.
Right.
Yeah, so would I. I'd be completely hesitant too because as good of a player as he is, he hasn't won in this league. And you could say, hey, maybe he hasn't had the team around him, but what you talked about, where's he been in the playoffs at times? Hasn't shown up defensively, not the guy that you want. He's always had that length and stuff like that, but I just feel that if he was, we already have a great offense in place. If you bring Brandon Ingram on here and you have a big three of Halliburton, Ingram, and Pascal Siakam on paper, that definitely sounds great. You could even throw Turner in there as a fourth. It sounds great, but I feel that you still have those defensive issues.
Mm.
And for what it might cost to trade for him and pay him, that's what scares me.
Yeah, the trade to get him is not that insane only because he's
His
making
value is
around
definitely
36.
lower. Yeah, it's no secret New Orleans wants to move on. So I think a year or two ago, you would definitely be ponying up some big time assets, but it's that max contract after that
Yeah.
that has me shaking in my boots.
No, that's a good reason to not want to go after a guy like that, a guy that could cost you a lot of money. So I understand the hesitation there, Facci, for sure. I don't want to spend too much time on Brandon Ingram because I think it's a pipe dream. I don't think it's going to happen. But just someone to keep an eye on if he does become available and the cost is super cheap. Why not make a call, see what it would cost? But I'm ready to move on to your next player.
Like a broken record, you've heard me say this name time and time. It's the yearly name on the trade list. It is DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre
Oh
Hunter
no,
right
not
now.
this guy again. Are we kidding?
Never letting this. Here's the thing. Atlanta, it could be a fire sale. It could be buy two, get one free, whatever it is. They might very well just be starting over. I don't even think the asking price for Hunter might even be that much at all. Jalen Johnson's probably someone that they're going to be looking to re-sign. I think that Hunter, his trade value might be at its lowest while he's actually kind of coming off of a career year quietly. Career high in scoring, and not a career high shooting percentage, but close to it. I think for 3-point land, that was a career high. Overall, he's someone that, Aaron Nesmith is a great hustler, defender, and all that. DeAndre Hunter is bringing more length to the table. He is 6'8". He is 26 years old. There is a lot to like, and he is under contract for the next few years. So I think that this is a move that if Indiana is able to make, I don't think they overpay, but I also think that they do get better as a result. I know you're not a Hunter guy, so lay it on me.
Yeah, I hear you, but I think they have a better chance with Aaron Nesmith as a starter than they do with DeAndre Hunter. I know Hunter's bigger,
Yeah.
but man, that dude's inconsistent. I think he's a bit of a fraud. Uh,
Mm,
honestly, like Virginia guy, which could be intriguing to Carlisle. Don't get me wrong, but nah, I'd rather have Aaron Nesmith on his contract than trade Aaron Nesmith plus stuff to go out and get DeAndre Hunter. So
fair.
I understand the intrigue because of the size and stuff like that, but to me, he is the modern version of a Harrison Barnes, but worse. Like
Uh,
Harrison Barnes on the Warriors, right? Like I think that DeAndre Hunter is a worse version of that.
hmm. Well, it depends because in that situation, the Warriors did have a lot of better players where Barnes could be like the fourth option behind, like a
Right.
Steph Clay
That's
and Draymond stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Hunter's numbers could be a little bit inflated due to being on an Atlanta team like that, but I think he's definitely not twice the player Aaron Nesmith is. He's
no.
paid twice the amount that
I
Aaron
think
Nesmith.
Nesmith's better.
Maybe. It's tough. It's tough.
I think Nesmith is a better player right now.
I think Hunter is more naturally gifted. I think Nesmith probably works harder and doesn't have the same type of size and things like that. So either
It's
way,
fair.
I could definitely see the we have Aaron Nesmith at home type of thing where you don't need to go out there and overspend. But if the man's value, if the trade value is really not high, pick up the phone, have a conversation.
Yeah.
What if there's a scenario where you can keep them both? You can keep Nesmith and get Hunter. I don't know. All of a sudden, the Pacers become a better defensive team, and you can still score.
All
Something
right,
to think.
Facci. Well, we'll can that. We'll revisit that if that does ever happen.
We will.
I think it's interesting.
I'll be back. All right.
We'll be back. All right, let's hope not. We're gonna move on to my next guy, and this is I'm staying with New Orleans, and I'm going after a guy that I think everybody has mentioned that they have interest in, and that is Herb Jones. Uh, I'm definitely keeping my Trey Murphy the third conversation out of today's podcast. Definitely a guy that I love. I just don't see him going anywhere. I think they've found something special. They're going to keep him. Herb Jones, on the other hand, same thing. Like he's a very special player, but they've got a lot of decisions to make down in New Orleans. I don't know what it would cost to get him. I have an idea. Don't know if it would work, but like Herb Jones, I think he would really help Indiana. So I'm putting him on my list.
I wanted to have Herb Jones on my list. I think he'd be an awesome addition for the Pacers.
Just
Talk about
couldn't bump DeAndre Hunter out for him.
well, because one was more realistic. So Herb Jones, all defensive first team, love it, great. Still a young player, but I mean, what are you going to trade for him? You look at draft pick wise, like I don't feel comfortable offering up like a 2028 unprotected first rounder or anything like that. It's a bold move. Where's this team going to be 4 years from now? I don't know. If you're going to offer up that, you
Hoisting the
kind of want
Lombardi.
more.
I'm just kidding.
What was that?
I said hoisting the Lombardi, but I was being silly. Larry
Yeah.
O'Brien trophy.
Exactly. No, look, that would be great. I would love to acquire Herb Jones. It's just the Pacers are kind of limited where it's like, are you going to punt on a couple of your young guys. I mean, we don't have to go through a trade right now, but there was a trade that I had in mind where I started looking at it. Herb Jones is about $13 million. I looked at it and I said, what if he did do Ben Mathurin, Jarris Walker, maybe threw in like some sort of like a
Both?
swap. And then I went, that's what I'm saying. All of a sudden I went, I can't do that. I can't do that.
Both.
That's why I went out.
What are
So
we doing?
exactly. That's why he didn't make my list. Right
Man.
now, you look at what the Pacers have to offer, they're limited for a guy like Herb Jones. So
Yeah.
I just don't know how you get it done without, getting crazy and saying, oh, there's a third team in there and this, or we just can't, we don't have the pieces to get it done without overpaying drastically.
Okay, Facci. I hear you. I hear you. I
Yeah.
don't think we need to waste some more time on Herb Jones. It's just an interesting name to keep an eye on. I think all other 29 teams would be interested in him as well. So, what kind of offer could Indiana give that other teams couldn't? Don't really know. So, let's move on to your next player.
My next player, this is just me with my hands right above my eyes, and I'm looking in on the window. I am window shopping, and it's Mikal Bridges.
Yeah,
I just
okay.
don't know how the Pacers could get it done without trading every young piece that they have and draft picks. And right now, I just don't see that path. But if there's one player that I think fits this team extremely well, I think it's Mikal Bridges.
What is the contract with him again? Is it 1 year left on his deal, or does he have another year after this year?
I want to say it's 2 years, but I'm in the process of
Yeah,
pulling.
I was gonna say I thought it was 2026 when he could be a free agent again. So Brooklyn can
I got
say
it
all they
written down.
want.
2 years left, $23.3 million next year, and 24.9 million the following year before he's an unrestricted free agent.
Okay, yeah, Mikal Bridges is on my list as well, so I'll just go ahead and talk about him here with you because I do think he's an interesting name. He doesn't make that much money where it could be, out of this world. You could combine plenty of salaries to get that deal done, and even a consolidation trade to get him could make a lot of sense. So, yeah, I think at this point you got to call Brooklyn's bluff. I mean, I think there's a lot of people in Brooklyn that are kind of kicking themselves because they didn't do the deal with Houston. That was reported where Houston was going to basically give them all their picks back that they got in the James Harden deal. So all I know is that Brooklyn, they're in a weird spot right now. I don't know exactly what direction they're going, but to me, they're going to be a bottom
Nobody knows.
dweller in the Eastern Conference. Mikal Bridges as your number one guy is going to get you nowhere. Mikal Bridges as your three or fourth, option guy is the way to really maximize what he can do as a player. I like Mikal Bridges a lot. He made my list for a reason, but I definitely think that I like him a lot better with Tyrese and Pascal surrounding him instead of just saying, okay, Mikal, you're our number one. Lead us to the promised land. Brooklyn, the promised land is not going to get you anywhere but the draft lottery.
I think, and I will never admit it, but I think he didn't want to be the number one this year. I think I think the losing kind of got to him a little bit, and he looked exhausted, and it kind of almost looked like at times he was, kind of like that SpongeBob meme where he's looking out through the window and watching everybody in New York on the other side for the Garden, all of his, Villanova friends having a blast while he's, at the bottom of the standings. They don't own their draft picks. So I think that life as the number one player, sometimes it just doesn't always work out. We've seen guys like Paul George say, you know what? Maybe I'm not a number one. I got to go elsewhere, be a number two, whatever it may be a number three, anything like that. I think for Mikal Bridges, he would be best suited in that type of situation where you do have what you mentioned, a Tyrese Halliburton and a Siakam, and that could be like a big three. But eventually, push is going to come to shove, and the Nets, they've never been able to retain their great players. Over time, they've all gotten traded eventually or left or anything of the sort, and they need to pick a direction and stick with it. But right now, they are that exact team that is in limbo, going nowhere anytime soon.
Totally agree, Facci. I'm going to move on to my next player here just so we can keep it moving. This player is honestly one of my favorite non-Pacers. It's a player that David Thorpe brought up, and so it would be a perfect fit for Indiana. This is the actual center insurance that I would go after if I could get it, and I think he would be of a seamless fit here in Indiana. We're going with the Louisiana State University product, Naz Reid.
I like him. I do. It's just, look, here's the thing with Nas. He's coming off of such a good year now that we missed it. We missed the window. I mean, I remember a year or two ago saying, "Go after him, didn't do it." Now it's like that man actually. It was Game 7 against the Nuggets. He swung that game in the final few minutes. He had like a stretch where he got a couple offensive rebounds and putbacks, and it was just that was what kind of did Denver in. And right now, the money it's great. I think it's $12.9 million. He was someone I looked at, and I just went, man, how do you get a player like Naz Reid? But I am 100% on board with you.
Yeah, I just wonder what the Timberwolves are going to do. Are they going to pay the tax? Are they going to go into the luxury tax and have that to worry about? I mean, they're going to extend Anthony Edwards, who actually he just got extended this coming year, so he's going to be on his super max. Karl Anthony Towns is on his max. Rudy Gobert is on a massive contract. They just got a lot of decisions to make, and I
Hey,
think that
McDaniel.
it could make more sense to trade Cat. It could make more sense to trade Gobert. Who really knows what they're going to do? But that's why I'm just keeping my eye on Minnesota because I feel like they're a team that's really interesting. Some of these key players, if they're afraid they're going to walk in free agency, you don't, I mean, you don't want to just give up somebody. But for example, let's just say a guy like Hartenstein leaves New York and gets paid big money somewhere else to be a starting center somewhere. That's tough. They definitely needed him for that playoff run this season, but now that they could lose him for nothing, that's a big asset to lose. So I think that if there's a potential player that could become available for Minnesota, that I don't think you're going to give up Jaden McDaniels. I don't think you're going to give up Anthony Edwards. Gobert, I don't think they're going to give up on him yet. Just winning the defensive player of the year. Towns is somebody they could give up on.
Feels like the
Um,
odd man out. He does.
what'd you say?
Towns feels like the odd man out. I don't think they would be able to get the type of value back for Rudy Gobert and anywhere close to what they traded for him. And I
Mhm.
just think at this point there would be more suitors for Towns amongst the league.
For sure. So, yeah, I'm just curious whether they're running back with Towns. Do they think Naz Reid can be Towns' replacement at the starting four? And if they do think that, how much is Naz Reid going to get in free agency? So that's just really interesting. I would look at him as an option. Be calling Minnesota, hey, what would it take to get him? And I would probably be willing to offer some big stuff to get him because I think he would fit here perfectly next to Siakam and Halliburton. I really like that fit.
I'm right on board with you. I think it would be a great fit. I think that Naz Reid is a starting caliber player in this league. I think that right now it's a blessing that Minnesota has him in the role that they have him in, but I don't think that's for long.
Yeah.
The last name on my list, I'm almost embarrassed to even say it. It would take a lot, but it's OG Anunoby.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I the only reason he made the list is because I heard today there was a report saying that he wasn't happy with the Knicks offer. The Knicks kind of tried to lowball him a bit. Apparently, the offer is about $35 million per year, and they wouldn't let him walk for anything, just for nothing. So, what if there was a sign and trade, that could be presented? What if they did lose out on Hartenstein and OG? I don't know. Maybe I guess they would resign Hartenstein if they can't resign OG, but at the same point, it was just something where I couldn't not put him on my list, but I know it's the longest of shots.
Yeah, OG Anunoby is number one on my list. So I think
Yeah.
we both had him at number one.
Yep. We did.
So I think we're in unison there. Like, okay, OG is the guy to go for. Um, yeah, I'm just kind of curious because there are different ways you could acquire him. Look, he could request a sign and trade. I think $35 million is what he's rumored to be expecting. Like that's what he wants. Great payday for him, pretty much doubling his salary from last season. But what I also have to remind people is he does have a player option for $19.9 million. And if he really wants to make it hard for New York, he could say, "Look, I'm opting into that deal. Trade me to where I want to be traded to.
Yeah.
If you don't want to give me the money that I deserve, then I'm going to kick this can down the road, and I'm going to re-enter free agency next year, and hopefully get that money from the team that's willing to pay me." Now, look, New York's in a much different spot because they've got the Jalen Brunson stuff. They've got Julius Randle on his big contract. DiVincenzo, they just signed him, but eventually he's going to be coming up. They've got a lot of good players, Josh Hart. So it's just they want to keep him together. But if he's not giving them the money they ask for, then maybe he does decide to just take less money next season and enter free agency the next year. And hopefully, maybe he gets on a better spot where someone could actually offer him that money. It's kind of kind of similar to what happened with Toronto and Siakam, right? It seemed like
Yep.
they weren't willing to give him a certain number, so they held on to him for as long as they could until they found a deal where he would basically agree to it. They would, Indiana, and the goal is for Indiana to extend him. I think everybody's kind of expecting that to happen here in the next couple of days, and that's kind of where I'm at with OG. I think that he wants to be in New York, but if he feels like they're giving him lowball offers and kind of being disrespectful, to me, there is a possibility that he could take his player option, opt into it, and request to be traded somewhere else. But at the same time, he could just do a sign and trade, like you mentioned, get that $35 million that he wants, and find a team that can find the matching salary to make that deal happen as well.
It's always a bold move, kind of just picking up that player option in this, because I think that he did prove his worth this year. The Knicks were a much better team with him in the lineup, and hey, he did try and have a gut it out or whatever you want to say in the playoffs to tough it out in Game 7. But I do think that I don't know if he's going to really re-sign early. I think that this is someone that a lot of guys want to at least test the market. He could kind of ride this out just to see if there are any other offers, and things could get interesting from there. So I'd be curious to see if he was someone that signed his deal early. But I think it's right for us to have him number one on our list, even if it's not realistic, because I think we're both in agreement, and many other Pacers fans are. He's probably the missing piece. He's
Yeah.
probably that puzzle piece that you're trying to complete, the whole set, and nothing really fits in other than that OG piece. And for now, hey, we might just have to keep on dreaming. He hasn't officially put pen to paper yet, so anything is possible.
Like that's what I told Tony East. Anything is possible. And we were talking about small forwards, and OG was the number one guy. Look, if OG wants to make the best possible chance for Indiana to win this year, it would be to opt into that last deal so the Pacers don't have to give up as much to acquire him. If he wants $36 million a year, then they're going to give up like 4 or 5 pieces just to make the salaries match. So that's where it does get interesting. Now, I do have one player left on my list we have not talked about yet. He's not my number one, obviously. I already told you OG is, but I think this player would be welcomed home
Mm-hmm.
with open arms. Everybody would be saying, you know what? We miss you. Now you can come back and get your redemption story. It's
Yeah.
Lance Stevenson. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
It is
Right. I was
Paul
about to be like,
George. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Paul George, right? I understand that the Clippers and him haven't come to terms on an agreement. That seems like there's a lot of frustration there. There was some interesting stuff that happened during Game 4 of the NBA Finals, where Paul George was a guest analyst with ESPN, as well as Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid was making comments about Paul George joining them, and they were kind of side eyeing each other. So that seems to be like the most likely destination if he doesn't return to the Clippers. But Paul George, back in February, Jake Fisher reported that he had interest in potentially reuniting with Tyrese Halliburton in Indiana. Those two have really made a nice friendship over the last couple of years. And so I'll just say this, Pacer fans, I think that they would embrace Paul George, even though there are probably some that are still mad at him. Getting him on this team would be great. The problem is he makes a crap load of money. If he were to opt into that final deal and do a trade like that, like we just talked about with OG, he's making $48 million next season. To acquire that, you have to really put some contracts together, which makes it really difficult. So I don't know if that's a realistic option. Now he could take less money and sign here for less, but I would be completely shocked if that happened. I think that's pretty much a 0% chance of happening. So you have to find like 4 or 5 salaries to make the deal work to get him here if that's what's going to happen, which is very, very difficult.
yeah, I look, love me some Paul George. I've said it on this podcast. Jermaine O'Neal will always be my favorite player, and then there was Paul George that helped kind of fill that void. I was really hurt when the trade happened. Everything. I've moved on. I've healed at this point. Look, it'd be great to have him be a Pacer again, but when you talk about what you just mentioned, we would have to shell out a large chunk of what makes this team good just to then pay him max money. And I think at this point, he ain't taking a discount to come to Indiana. I mean, it's just not happening. And I think at this point, the ship sailed. I don't see it happening.
Pacers need a consolidation trade, Facci. Why not trade 5 for 1?
Yeah, we do need to consolidate, but we do need to keep a little bit of the farm,
Just a
just a
little
little.
bit. Yeah. You'd be selling the whole entire farm for a 35-year-old Paul George. Doesn't sound realistic, doesn't sound great, but hey, if the Pacers feel like, man, they were, a closer away from beating Boston and winning the NBA Finals, would they be willing to push some chips in to make another move to feel like they can compete more? I don't know, but I could see the case for it, right?
The case could be made, no doubt about that. And I think that that's one of those topics where I would love to see if you put the poll out there, how close is it to saying do it or no, you can't do that? Because I think sometimes people can make a move with their heart and say, I would love to have him back. But the question is, at what cost? And that cost sounds like everything.
Sounds like not everything, but quite a bit
Close
of
to it.
stuff,
Yeah,
right?
like there's no Tyrese Halliburton in that deal. We know that. You would imagine there's no Siakam,
There's no
but
Siakam in that deal,
wait,
but everybody else on the
just about
table.
everybody else is available in that deal or is on the table for that deal. So that's what scares me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher there. I will say this: for all my fake trades that I did not include Andrew Nembhard in one single trade.
Either did I. That's a spoiler
Yeah,
for you guys. Not one.
I just couldn't do it. I feel like it was super dirty to have him on the podcast and then put him in a trade thing. I couldn't do it, and I don't want to do it. I love Andrew Nembhard. I'm a big believer. So I was in a group text today, and they were like, "Pacers need to upgrade their shooting guard." And I said, "I think y'all are sleeping on Nembhard." They're like, "Well, if we can get a three and move Neesmith to the two," I said, "I understand that, but you're sleeping on them. I think Nemhard's ceiling is still significantly higher than Aaron Neesmith." So
Absolutely. I don't think that could be debated, and that's no knock on Aaron Neesmith. Great player, but I just think that
good player.
yeah, yes. Good player is more fair to say.
Yeah.
But I just think at this point, this is like Nemhard mania. His stock is at his highest, and right now, there's a lot of people that are probably saying that man is a starting point guard in this league, and we have him as our starting shooting guard next to our All NBA starting point guard. So not many teams have that luxury.
Yeah, not just our starting point guard, but our Team USA point guard that was also the starting point guard of the Eastern Conference. So All-Star game, right? So let's not just ignore that and our All NBA point guard Facci. Like Tyrese Halliburton's a top 15 player last year, and at his peak, he was probably top 7, top 8 with
Yeah,
how he played before the injury. So, it's not like Nemhard's really getting, pushed to the side for somebody that's not deserving. It's like Halliburton's great, and you play the same position, and you're ascending to greatness. So keep them together as long as you can. That's how I feel. But with that being said, you've heard our list. It essentially turned out being our top 10 of both. So, Facci, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find us at on social.
absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at PacersPod, STP. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at underscore FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at PacersPod, STP. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to youtube.com/setting the pace, a Pacers podcast where you can find all of our video content, including our one-on-one, I guess you could say, 2-on-1 interview with Andrew Nembhard. That was a great conversation there. Got a lot of questions in. Andrew gives very quick answers, so we were able to cover a lot of different topics, and I think you guys are going to enjoy that if you haven't watched a YouTube video. You can check that out. If you haven't listened to it on the audio platform, please go ahead, go back and do that. Andrew definitely gave us some good sound bites there. But Facci, 5-star rating interview wherever you get your audio platform podcast at. But if you're up in the Pacers, at least look to make a big swing potentially in the offseason. Then hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers.